In the summer of 2026, the once every 4-year global tournament called the World Cup is facing one of the worst heat waves on record. And so it might seem surprising that fans would push back on a new, seemingly logical rule. At the 22 and 67 minute mark, players must pause for a 3-minute water break. And yet, while this water break might seem logical to the casual observer, fans of the sport are seeing something highly concerning underneath, which is leading them to ask an existential question. With this water break, are they even watching the same game? It might seem like an overreaction, but to understand, one might take a look to June 2026, when Canada was playing Qatar. Canada would go on to its biggest World Cup victory in history, and yet, at the 22-minute mark, boos and jeers erupted when the players paused for the water break. But wouldn't the crowd want to assure their players were refreshed, that no long-term damage was done? And yet, this is where the curiosity starts. Because there was no heat wave here. The game was played in an enclosed stadium. The stadium was temperature controlled. Now, why would the governing body of the World Cup, FIFA, enforce such a water break in a temperature controlled stadium? Well, here is where it gets even stranger. For when FIFA made the announcement, it did not come from a health panel or even a report on the positive effects such a hydration break might give. Instead, it was made by the man in charge of operations for the World Cup, Chief Tournament Officer Manolo Zabiria, just before the tournament started in December of 2025. Making matters more curious, the water breaks were not announced on a case-by-case basis, but as was seen in the Canada vs. Qatar game, these breaks were made as a universal fiat for all games played. And even more conspicuous, the announcement was made at the World Broadcasters meeting, where the people gathered were not necessarily discussing players' health, but they were most definitely discussing advertising. If these so-called hydration breaks were made out of concern for the players' health, why would Zabiria make the announcement to broadcasters? We will get to that question. But first, an equally compelling one emerges. So 6 minutes are added to the runtime of the game. Fans actually think this completely changes it? How could it affect things so much? Is there any proof? The answer to that question is yes, there is. In 2014, due to actual heat concerns, water breaks were instituted in the first World Cup game ever, with Netherlands vs. Mexico. And yet, when these breaks were instituted, they did not just give players a break from the heat, it arguably changed the entire trajectory of the game, and therefore, the World Cup. Unlike Canada vs. Qatar, where Canada won 6-0, Mexico vs. Netherlands was remarkably close, Mexico leading 1-0 for the entire game until the last 2 minutes, when the Dutch scored the tying game and then won with a penalty kick in overtime. After the game, the coach for the Netherlands pointed to an incident he clearly used for his advantage, that water break. Using it as an extra timeout, he was able to change the strategy, turn the tide of the game, and send Mexico home. These water breaks were now proven to matter, arguably changing the outcome of the World Cup itself. If the game could be affected by these pauses so much, what does this mean? And why would FIFA institute such a new rule? The answer comes from a country who has famously for years cared less about the World Cup and more about its own game. American football, a much younger sport, has grown up tailor-made for advertisement, and the differences in its finances are staggering. In its championship game, the Super Bowl, American football captures similar revenue to all 104 games of the World Cup, despite it only being watched by about 130 million people, as opposed to the 1.5 billion that tune into the World Cup. The reason is simple. American football has been built by a sponsor-rich environment and viewed by a wealthy country. In 2026, FIFA had already significantly boosted its value by hosting the World Cup in the United States, and now by adding water breaks, FIFA added 832 new 30-second spots, while simultaneously making the game not one of halves, but of quarters, also more familiar to the United States. The sacrifice was one to purists, but it was also a $250 million pickup for what fans will experience as 2 short 3-minute breaks and teams will experience and can adjust to on equal footing. But here's the strange part. In 2026, Fox's broadcast agreement with FIFA was already locked. The $250 million went all to Fox and none to FIFA. Why would FIFA do this? First, the bright side. In 2030, FIFA, technically a non-profit organization, will be able to show broadcasters the windfall Fox made in broadcasting in 2026 and push the bidding war to broadcast the World Cup that much higher in 2030. As a non-profit organization, this should not be a boom for profiteers in FIFA. Instead, theoretically, this should be a massive boost for impoverished nations. FIFA is supposed to distribute that money it receives in profits to all 211 teams, and sometimes these are the entire budgets for smaller and less affluent countries. In its best light, FIFA had changed the game, but this change could help bring money to the people who needed it the most. And this would make the most sense were it not for more disturbing circumstances. In 2015, the Department of Justice arrested FIFA officials, some of which were punished and some of which were not. Unfortunately, these arrests came precisely from skimming broadcast money from FIFA that was supposed to help the poorer countries. So when FIFA now adds new water breaks and says, "Don't worry, it's for the players," fans can't help remembering the last time they were told to trust the people holding the money. So, are the water breaks good or bad? The reality is, both could be true. Money can flow back to the game, new fields, new coaches, and kids playing the sport. It can also leak into the pockets of the more nefarious, like it did before. Soccer has changed countless times and survived every time, and will survive this one too, perhaps be more profitable than ever. But the next time the game stops and ads roll, you can ask yourself one simple question. Who is this pause really for? Time will tell, and it all came from making a game of halves a game of quarters. Brought to you by a seemingly innocuous water break. This is Muro.